This is Around the Farm, the podcast about all things ag. I'm your host, Clint, and today we're going to be talking about all things cotton. We have two great guests with us. We have Fran Deville and Brandon Cavins. So let's jump right into it. Fran, Brandon, welcome to the show. How about y'all introduce yourselves to the listeners?
Well, my name is Brandon Cavins. I am the Climate Activation Manager for the North Delta and Southeast. I grew up around farming all my life, and went to college for farming or for ag business at Murray State University. And then after that, I actually stayed in Murray and took a job with a small company that was doing precision ag. And that's where I kind of learned my passion of precision ag. So I've been doing in the precision ag field since about 2007, and going on 15 years of working with precision ag, and been with Bayer Crop Science for about 3 years now.
And I'm Fran Deville, and I am from Opelousas, Louisiana. I grew up about 50 miles away in a small farming town called New Roads, Louisiana. My mom's family were large sugarcane growers, and my cousins still farm sugarcane and grain. And my dad worked for LSU as a county extension agent. So being around agriculture, not only from a practical standpoint of farming, but also from an advisory standpoint through my dad, since I was basically born. I joined Monsanto about 43 years ago and held various roles. And my last job with them was as a research agronomist for Louisiana and South Arkansas. And I saw the power of FieldView and what it could do for individual growers. And that's when I made the move and came over to FieldView almost 6 years ago.
Nice. Well, that between both of you, a wealth of knowledge right there and a lot of experience. So again, thank you both for taking time out of your busy schedules, especially this time of year, to jump on and have a conversation with us here today. So thank you.
You're welcome.
And I'd like to talk. I mean, I don't think we have a lot of conversations around cotton on here. So I thought bringing both of you on here, having a conversation around cotton and all the different pieces in there, I figured that'd make for a good conversation today.
We're glad to talk about it. Glad to have you in the South.
Hey, there we go. There we go. Well, I tell you what, I guess let's just start right at the beginning here. I know that cotton prices have been, on the up and up, demand's growing. What do you see, as far as for just how that impacts just the overall cotton production this year?
So, Clint, I cover also East Texas and Oklahoma, as well as the South Delta, Louisiana, Mississippi. So we have definitely seen a shift because our growers grow multiple crops. But we have, because of nitrogen prices and stuff, we have seen definitely an increased shift in cotton acres in my area.
Yeah, the same up here in the North Delta and the Southeast. A lot of diversity, a lot of different crops. A lot of guys moving from corn to cotton this year, or guys that have, not really guys that are switching. It's more guys that have been in cotton that are planting more acres of cotton this year than they ever have before. And it's all due with the prices of not just the inputs, but also the price of cotton on the commodity side.
Now, I know that cotton is a high management crop as well. I mean, a lot of data collected when they're out there planting and growing cotton. How does that then transform into trying to collect all that data and all the digital pieces? Is the onboarding process even more time consuming or things of that nature as you start looking into a cotton crop?
Well, one thing I would tell you about cotton, and you mentioned it is a highly, highly managed crop. There is no other crop that I know of that is managed this way. It's as much an art as it is a science. The beauty of FieldView is that we can now capture all that information for a grower because growers can input or have input maybe somewhere between 16 and 20 actual layers of data throughout the season because of the intense management. And one of the exciting parts was to get satellite imagery because depending on how the cotton is growing dictates how you have to manage it, because you got to remember, it is a perennial crop. It wants to grow for a couple of years, and we force it to do everything in 1 year. So growth regulators are highly, highly used. So people use their eyes and boots on the ground to manage it. And satellite imagery is also a helper to start picking out subtle areas or small areas in the field where growth could be getting out of hand, and growers can kind of pick where they need to put higher rates and using only what they need where they need it.
Brandon, is that the same in your area too?
It is really and truly. I mean, cotton is kind of managed the same yet different all the way across the deltas, but about 16 different layers of data is usually what we find with it. And, getting planters and sprayers set up especially, and then having them set up and then looking at aerial imagery, especially in the growth regulators that Fran's talking about, to be able to spray where needed and make sure, because not every cotton field grows the same. And not every area in a cotton field grows the same. So it's, a lot of times it's almost backwards in what you're looking at. When you're looking at imagery, you see the dark greens, that's your healthiest plant, but it also might be a plant that we need to stop growing because it's almost a little backwards than what we're looking at when you're looking at corn and beans. You're looking for those healthy areas going, hey, this is our high production areas. Well, yeah, that's a very healthy plant in cotton. It's how do we make sure that it fruits, because that's what it's all about. It's not about how big the cotton plant is. It's about how much fruit the cotton plant has.
Well, I know, you talk about that high management aspect and all those different layers. I think I said, in upwards of 16 layers there, Fran. A lot of that's due to there's a lot of passes across a cotton crop as well, right? I mean, as you're managing that growth and weed control and things of that nature, how many different passes are we talking about that goes onto a cotton crop on any normal year?
Well, so just like crops in the Midwest, we plant, we fertilize, we put out chemical applications. What really drives increased usage or increased layers is the number of PGR applications you have to make during the year, and also the number of insecticide applications that you have to make from early on cotton because of thrips all the way till the end of the season with plant bugs and other insects, and then maybe even some late season fertilization with potassium or phosphorus, because depending on the growing season can be big drains. So, and then eventually, if it stays warm, you actually have to put out defoliants, things that actually shut the cotton down and stop it from growing in order to let the bolls open up and then be able to be picked in a timely manner.
Oh, wow. So when you talk about some of those pests, does that vary based on, Brandon, where you're at versus Fran going into, where you're at in Louisiana versus, going out into Texas? Are there different pests and are there different pressures at that point in time, depending on where you're at?
Yes. So, and also you got to remember timing. So I see things in Texas before it gets to Louisiana, and a lot of times, and before it gets to Brandon. But yes, different pests are they're pretty much all in all places, but to the level they get definitely is different by geography.
Absolutely. I mean, that's one of the biggest things about the management, and why Fran says it's not just a science, but it's an art, is because of the timing of the different pests and when you've got to spray, making sure that you're going in at the right season, the right times, the right weather conditions. The weather patterns are going to really change what you're going to do, depending on if it's hot and dry or if it's cool and wet. depending on the summer. So being able to have all that information, that's one of the big uses of FieldView, is having all that information at your fingertips. How much water do you get? How much water have you annually got on that field? And then what are your temperatures? What are your growing degrees? And that kind of information is, in my opinion, vital to growing a cotton crop.
So, Clint, I'll give you a little quick story here just to kind of tell you something. So, like everywhere, you got to have water. We irrigate. And one of the first growers I ever worked with FieldView was one of the guys I used to do research plots with when I was, working for Delta Pine. And basically, the situation was telling him he needed to irrigate. And every time he got to that, he irrigated, and then within 3 days, he'd catch about an inch of rain or inch and a half of rain. At the end of the year, though, when we got the yield data and looked at the yield maps, what he found out is highest yielding cotton was actually outside of the irrigated area, because while the art and science was telling him, look, it's getting a little dry, you can't let this crop go, and went ahead and watered, Mother Nature doubled up on him and gave him more water, and at the end, he gave him too much water. So, he used to always say, water giveth and water taketh away. So he was able to show, maybe I pulled the trigger a little too early on the irrigation. You got to look at that forecast down the road a little bit, to see what's going on.
Well, it's funny that you both mentioned water, because that was one of the things I wanted to talk about. Because one of my trips down into the Delta, I was just amazed at the number of precision level fields that they're doing in furrow irrigation. I mean, we just don't see anything like that up around us. That nowhere near us, right? And then just the size of a lot of the pivot irrigations. And I am in an area where there's a lot of pivots. We got one on our farm, but just the sheer size of them, I was so impressed with just the whole water system that was there. So with that, does a cotton crop take a lot of water, more so than maybe other crops?
Well, no, it's more of a dry land crop, okay? But it does need water timely, because once it goes, especially in the reproductive stage, it needs, water to go. But one of the problems we have here in the Delta, at least in the southern Delta, unlike the Midwest, we are surface drainage. In other words, we form dirt. Midwest forms soils. I always joke. So we don't have any of this percolating down, going through tiles and things like that. I think Brandon can comment about, we normally see a lot. The first thing we do when we see low yielding areas is usually around drainage.
Yeah, water is it's vital, but it's not really what cotton likes. It likes that hot, dry weather. That's the reason we grow it in the South. But it's all about timely water, and that's where the irrigation and the in-furrow. Because if it doesn't have timely water, it's a crapshoot, and that's the biggest thing. And that's not much different than what you deal with in the Midwest as well. Timely water for every crop is key, but even more so in cotton.
Yeah, controlling that Mother Nature variable is makes things a little easier, at least when she cooperates with that. I guess I'll put it that way. So.
Well, one thing that was funny, when I got with FieldView, actually I was an agronomist, and I just happened to have an iPad that would work with a little drive unit, and I used it to do a couple plots. What was nice to see is a couple plots where it wasn't that we got a lot of rain, but what we were doing, we were getting it so often that in the end, it never needed to be irrigated. And so at the end of the day, instead of calling it a dry land plot, we called it an irrigated plot, because about every 4 or 5 days, we're catching a half inch of rain, just like it was irrigating. And that was one of the powers of the tool for me, really got me excited, because it helped me figure out what was going on in the plot. And the one big thing too, it's not sexy, but what it is in cotton, temperature. So doesn't mind hot temperatures at night, but during the day, but at night it must cool down. That plant has to rest. And I have solved many of problems back in the day why the cotton is acting like it is because through FieldView, we were seeing the temperature high and low every day. And you could see where the temperature was never going below 80 degrees. And that's a bad deal in cotton.
Yeah, being able to track that weather, I thought it was fascinating. Dad and I sat down even on our farm, and looking through just some of the historical rainfalls and things of that nature, and you kind of go back and see when you got the best yields and things of that nature. And it's really interesting being able to correlate a lot of that, and you can really see whether it's temperature, whether it's rainfall, amounts, or even timeliness. It's just fascinating there. One of the other pieces that I guess I'd ask too. When we're looking at whether it's planting the field, whether it's fertilizing, we're looking at soil types as well for another layer. Is that an important layer within cotton as well?
Well, I'll tell you this. So, and it'll change. So I'm going to make sure Brandon comments on this. But as you get down south, I mean, we tend to start sandy at the top near the bayous and all this, and run to a clay bottom. So we're not like the Midwest. We just tend to have maybe a couple of soil changes as a whole going across the field. So yes, there is an impact to it, but not like the Midwest. And I think Brandon may have a little bit more variation even we do.
Yeah, we do. Even in my territory of the North Delta, if you go over to Arkansas, as you said, a lot of zero grade fields. So the soil type maps don't really, really help in that area. But you come over to the Tennessee side, some of that northern Mississippi, it really does. We tend to go more about, especially in this Tennessee market, you've got 6 or 7 different soil types in the same field. So we tend to have more variability, more, hey, we pick our fields based on the soil type that we're going to grow cotton in. Because we can variable rate our corn and beans a little easier than we can our cotton. And so a lot of times we'll pick and choose our fields based on, what soil types, what conditions we have in the field overall.
Now, you talk about, like seeding rate and whatnot. For cotton, does that change throughout the field, or does it change from dry land to irrigation as far as for just the number of plants that we're trying to grow?
Yes, to a degree. I mean, there is a kind of a sweet spot population. But the one thing is, so you got to understand a little bit about cotton. They plant it about 1/2 inch deep, maybe. You just want to get dirt on it. Cotton is very hard generally to get it started. But once it germinates and puts leaves, that's it. Then you can't almost kill it. You can't kill it. But so the bottom line is, though, the one thing, so we tend to plant a little bit more seed than needed if everything was perfect, because life is not perfect. If you had 1 seed per foot across the field, that is all the cotton you need. But we tend to have to plant 2, 3, 4 to ensure we get there, because cotton has an ability to compensate. It'll get bigger. It'll spread out. If you manage with PGRs and hold it down, put on more fruiting sites, you really can get the same yield with even low populations just by crop management. And that gets back to there's kind of a feel and art plus the science that has to come to play.
No, that's great. That's something I got to ask a few of these. I know you may laugh at me on these basic questions that I got to ask, but I just it's the only way I can learn, So the other question I'd have too, and then I want to jump back into some of the more FieldView specific stuff, but I know across our farming operation, if I look at our soybeans, we plant, probably 5, 6, 7 different varieties of soybeans, all landing in different maturity zones. Is cotton, set up pretty similar to where there's different varieties that I'm trying to pick and choose for different qualities or different, maybe different maturities?
Well, yes. I mean, we have early maturities, mid maturities, and late season maturities. But as a general rule, most growers tend to just go with the highest yielding varieties and just manage earliness through the use of PGRs. But there's a little bit of spread. I think down here In the area I cover, a guy might plant 2 or 3 varieties of cotton. Generally, is about as many as they would do.
Yeah, pretty much the same up here. I mean, it's just a couple of different varieties. Everybody's got their go-to that everybody wants, and then you kind of go down the list from there on what you get. But it's pretty much goes back to it's all about yield. It's all about how many bales can you make out of it, and the highest yielding stuff tends to be where people go, and then is it the amount of management put into it is what really gets that yield to where it needs to go. I mean, it's all about managing more than it is the variety, where in the corn and beans world, it's more about the variety half the time than it is the management.
Well, one thing I'd add in there, it's because you can't, every one of those varieties has a personality. Now, no, you plant corn and it's pretty much, I love corn, but it just pop, it just goes along. Cotton, every one of these varieties has a personality unto itself that changes depending on the weather. And to Brandon's point, if you put too many of these out here with really no appreciable change in yield, you're driving yourself crazy trying to manage them. And poor management will lead to low yields.
Well, and that management piece is actually where I was wanting to hit on next, with really in regards to FieldView and just data management as well. Fran, I think you mentioned at the top of this that consultants are used across all of the cotton acres. Being able to have access to the farmer's data, being able to share that back and forth, being able to constantly view and track all of that. How important is a tool like FieldView to have access, that easy of access to these crop consultants that are out there helping all the cotton growers?
Well, I simply put it, knowledge is power. The more information you get in, the better decisions you can make. Because in the end, you're still going to need boots on the ground. You need the consultant, his retailer, his trusted advisor. But the more information that you have in your hand is, the better decisions you can make. And we've got great people out there today doing that. That's why the industry is still there. But even just in the case of satellite imagery, where it's just an extra help because we can't walk every inch of every field. A quick glance says, hey, let me make sure I look at this. It's just an additional tool. And then at the end of the year, you kind of get to read the whole book and go, you know what? I'm making me think about something for next year. And I'll give you a good example. In West Texas, they have a disease called Texas black root rot. There are some treatments at planting, but in the end of the day, it's kind of expensive. So all throughout the year, the cotton will die in those areas. But they'll look at the satellite imagery that's showing where that cotton actually did die, and they can use that the following year to create a application script of where they're going to put their dollars of fungicides, out to treat it. And eventually, it's a big help. And we're pretty excited. We just really rolled that out this year. So we're looking forward to telling that story because growers are the ones that actually came to me and said, hey, Fran, here, take a look at my satellite imagery. This is where all the root rot is killing the cotton. And man, could FieldView put in there where we could write a script? Well, today we can do it. We listened to the grower and built that capability going forward.
That's one of the things I love about just digital ag in general. A lot of times, we push tools out and we expect someone to use it like, X, Y, and Z. And next thing you know, they're using it like, D, E, and F. And it's just so cool to be able to see the creativity, the ingenuity that folks have when you provide tools and they start using it like you didn't even need, realize that it could be used for. So I think that's just fascinating within that digital ag space.
So just to add on to that, what I'm saying, herbicides, varieties, any kind of pesticide or everything has been developed to answer an unmet need. And digital ag is the same thing. We're now being able to double down on what we know and bring it down to a farm, to a field level. Because, you made me think when we started talking about this. So with my dad, you went to the university research station 100 miles away and brought that information in. Then as my career came along, companies had research farms and started doing research plots on individual farms, maybe 20 miles away. And today with digital ag and consultants and other folks, now you can turn your whole farm, your individual fields into a research trial, because you have a way to map and capture that data on a site specific and solve problems. Not that things were bad in the past. It's just additive. I used to drive to a payphone to make calls. Now you got to go to a museum to see a payphone,
Yeah. Brandon, one of the questions I'd have for you on that, we just talked, heard Fran talk about the collection of data, right? And I know that's a very important piece is around compatibility, right? And I know that we have spent a lot of time and effort continuously driving our compatibility up within FieldView. What have you seen in your area on just uptake of guys putting maybe FieldView drives in or getting their data into the system? How has that changed over the course of the time that you've been there?
Oh, it's changed immensely. I mean, from when I took over, there was probably 200 real users of FieldView in the North Delta, and at this point, we're probably somewhere closer to 600-700. And it's a lot of it's got to do with compatibility. It really does. And, prices were good, especially last year. There's been a lot of new turnover and a lot of new equipment. One of the things that I found this year is making sure that your equipment is set up exactly correct. It's probably been my biggest struggle. But once we get it set up correctly, we haven't had many struggles at all. So getting equipment set up right and using it has been one of the biggest things that we've had in the North Delta, especially in the Southeast, and it's only getting better. Every year, people are turning over new equipment. As they're turning over new equipment, then we're having better compatibility.
Well, Fran, I think if I may be mistaken, so you might have to correct me here, but I think the first visualization of a cotton picker going in the field was coming from you, if I remember right. A few years ago when we were getting into this. Can you talk about just what it took to get to that point?
Well, I tell you what, there's some guys that really, really had to fight hard, and all that, because, it's not the biggest, sexiest crop in the world, but had a lot of guys. And like I mentioned earlier, we have growers that are not plant only cotton. They plant everything. And what brought pushed the idea was because, hey, I like FieldView on corn and soybeans. I got this cotton crop out here that cost me $600, $700 an acre to plant and grow. And I need more help. And can y'all get this? And some of my friends, childhood friends, they, president of the cotton boards and things like that. And so some of the people back in the day, we got together, we huddled up, and, we just started capturing data off of the machines. And you got to remember, there weren't but a couple of machines that even had, to Brandon's point, they didn't even have a yield monitor, because why? There wasn't a need for it. And so we had to convince some people that it would work. And as Brandon has mentioned, the equipment's come along. A lot of trial and error, riding along, capturing data, letting the engineering group sort all that information out, to where today, the 4 big picker models, out in the stripper area and in the Delta, now we can hook a drive to it and capture all that information. But a lot of nuances in cotton pickers, as far as what you're getting and having to decipher. And the funny part is, the real first big time I saw the pickers was when I was driving in Ankeny, Iowa, and that's where they're made. Not in the South. They put them, I tell them, they must have put them on a barge and ship them down here. So, but it's a lot of hard work that went into it, and a lot of growers that were very nice to let us work with them. And I can't thank them all enough. for that.
Yeah, I mean the grower involvement in getting a lot of our different technologies. I mean not just FieldView, but I mean a lot of the technologies that we push out. I mean without our farmers that are participating, without the dealers that are backing them up and supporting us, and without our teams on the ground, it takes a lot of people, right, to drive that innovation for sure.
Well, one of the things I really look at it as, because when we launched Roundup Ready and Bollgard in cotton, the insect trait, the bottom line is Monsanto was on the cutting edge. You're the tip of the spear, and guess what? You're going to make mistakes, or you're going to stumble on things. You got to always learn. Same thing in the digital world. I think FieldView was basically one of the first out there as far as grabbing that kind of data this kind of way without going in a thumb drive and all this. I mean, so I really appreciate that 10 or 15% that have been here forever and a day and have really been working with us to solve issues and all that. Because look, it's electronics. Lightning storm might cause something, but you know what? I never take a guy calling and saying, "Hey, it's not doing this" as a bad thing. It just tells you they're hungry. They've eaten a potato chip and they can't eat just one. They want more. And usually to the point, they're already thinking about the future. They want more than even we can think of it sometimes, because it doesn't happen overnight to get something done.
Well, Brandon, I got to ask, as we kind of wrap up here, if you were to give a word of advice to the farmers that aren't on FieldView yet, what would be the advice to get them over the hump, to get the iPad in there, the drive in there, and start collecting data?
Well, I think Fran might have said it best earlier. Knowledge is power. Knowing your fields, knowing your individual fields, not just what a plot here or a plot there says. My area, not what Union City says. What does your field say? What does each individual field say? And that is what FieldView does. And if, when being able to break it down and really dig into the data, and you don't have to understand it all at first. That's one of the biggest things that I see farmers is they think, "Oh, I got this started. I got to know everything about it." And that's where they get intimidated. No, let's find one thing that you relate with. Let's find one imagery that really shows you something on your entire farm. And if you start understanding it, you'll ask for that next bite and that next bite. Next thing you know, you become a super user and you didn't even realize it. You become a guy that is constantly digging his own data and not even realizing it. So I challenge people all the time on, your farm. And I don't want to say that I know your farm better than you, because we don't. But if you have all the information that I have available at my fingertips and you know your farm that well, think about if you put the two together. And you put those two together, the amount of information that you have and the amount of knowledge, true knowledge that you have about your farm is unbelievable. And that's where precision ag as a whole is trying to get to, and especially with FieldView, because it does break it down. So, we can go to row passes and look at the data in each individual row, which there's nothing else out there that does that. And that's the beauty of FieldView, and that's what I challenge people to get to. But I always challenge them, let's don't try to eat the whole pie in one bite. Let's take bites. Let's get a fork, maybe even a napkin, and let's go to town. And but I do appreciate it.
Brandon, I think that's incredibly well said. So thank you for that. And honestly, thank you to both of you to honestly for jumping on here, taking time out of your guys' busy schedule. I know, again, this is a crazy time of year, and so pulling you out of the field or having you sit down and join us here, I know takes a lot. So thank you. And guys, I just wish you the best of luck on this growing season this year. So
thank you, Clint. Enjoyed it.
Thank you for the time, Clint. We're need to have you back down after harvest, and we'll talk more.
Hey, sounds great. I'd be happy to come down. So have a good one, guys. Hey, a big thank you to Fran and Brandon for joining us here today. That was a great conversation, and I learned a ton of new things about cotton. Also, thank you, the listener. If you like this podcast, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and share it with all your friends as well. Also, Around the Farm is brought to you by Climate FieldView. And you can catch us wherever you listen to podcasts at, and be sure to check out our YouTube channel as well. And with that, we'll see you around the farm.